just reducing the consumption of the very rich can free up a lot of resources to feed the poor. So that is the concept behind Millennium Consumption Goals. Not easy because the affluent do not want to give up their privileges.
I was just going to ask you, isn't this Robin Hood or Sura Saradiyal, take from the rich and give the poor? Is that what you're advocating?
Yes, but there is no Saradiyal to do it because the world's leaders always side with the elites. They will not think. The main argument we are using is the following. First is there is a middle level of government. For example, leaders of communities, mayors of cities, heads of big companies and so on.
So you're talking the middle strata of
government. Middle strata of leadership. They are seeing this because they realize that they are at the top of the pyramid, very comfortable, but if the whole pyramid crumbles, they will also fall down. And they, if you're a mayor, now there is a coalition of 2,000 cities in Europe called the Climate Alliance who have said, we will adopt the Millennium Consumption Goals. Why? Because the mayor said, we know our citizens personally. And we know that in my city, let us say in Bonn, we can reduce the energy use by 50% in the next 10 years, or the water use and so on. Now, if all the major cities and communities are able to reduce their consumption collectively, then it's much easier for the national leaders to say, well, all the urban areas are reducing consumption, I can also take those goals. They will have more courage to come out. So by working with the middle level, we are getting more action at a voluntary level without waiting for treaties and huge
So globally, how is that approach working?
It is working quite well in the sense that we are building up momentum.
And in Sri Lanka? Sorry.
Sri Lanka less so because, as I said, in the poorer countries, the idea is mainly that you have to focus on the poor and raise their minimum consumption levels.
But surely in this equation, talking for the side of the affluent, as you say, for example, just for the sake of argument, if you have worked harder and if you can afford it, surely someone might say, well, I can afford it, why can't I consume more? I mean, if that person is poor, it's, well, if obviously I'll help him, I do some charity if I can. But if that person is poor, he can't afford it, well, he can't afford it. I have the money, why can't I consume it? Your answer?
Well, the answer is because the commodities are not properly priced. I mean, in the sense that many of the things that we use wastefully are underpriced. They should be much more expensive in a sense. And secondly, that...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this makes the dialogue interesting. If we do that, then in your triangle, you're going to say that's going to have an impact on the socio side. In your triangle, one part is the people. And then you're going to say, well, if we don't really price it at a really low level, then those people can't afford it.
Yeah, that's where the principles of sustainable pricing, which I worked on for many years, come in. That is, you have methods where you can ensure that the basic requirements are met at a low price. It's only when people start consuming large amounts that they are charged a higher price. Now, for example, in the case of electricity or water, this is done through what is called a block tariff. The first block is very cheap. So if you have a few light bulbs or you have a few taps in your house, and then that amount of water or electricity is given cheap. But once you start putting in air conditioning and other things, then the cost of those blocks goes up. So in a sense, that is the Robin Hood principle. It's the same principle of progressive taxation, that the lowest slab of income earners pay a lower tax rate. As you go up the ladder, you pay a higher tax rate.
Talking of your Millennium Goals, you also have now your own institute, the Munasinghe Institute, called MIND. You call it MIND very appropriately. Talk to us a little bit about MIND. What work do you do globally? What work do you do in Sri Lanka?
Well, the most important thing that MIND does is it gives scholarships and builds young people. We promote what are called ambassadors of sustainable development. So we have more than 200 scholars now university students, second and third year students in Sri Lankan universities, and it's equivalent of a Mahapola scholarship and so on.
Yeah.
But what is very important is nurturing young minds. So it is a kind of philanthropy, right? And it is all from family funds. We don't sort of go to outside sources. The second thing we do is dissemination of ideas, that we support conferences and seminars and other things to talk about these kinds of things that you and I were discussing in this program, to educate the general public, because you have to bring these from the realm of the esoteric to common knowledge, and I think people are basically intelligent. They want to know. And the third aspect, of course, is research, which is basically my own personal research into sustainomics and some of those things. We also train people abroad. Now, for the last 5 years, I've been training every year 300 senior government officials in China on sustainable development. I run training programs for secretary level and additional secretary level people in India. I've training programs in South Africa and in Brazil. So there is a training component as well.
And that must sit very well with your travel interests, aren't you? You're an avid traveler, aren't you? You love your travel?
Yes, I think that was from a very early age. If I might hark back very quickly, I mean, when I was young, I traveled, hitchhiked through South America, through the Middle East. I almost lost my life coming through the Middle East 1 month after the Six-Day War, the famous Six-Day War. And since then, my student travels whetted my appetite, and I've pretty much visited most countries in the world, either for work or for pleasure.
So you like, we are coming to that segment where it's your moment in the spotlight. I mean, you've been in the spotlight for over 2 hours now, but your time to speak to posterity, if you like. But before that, Mohan Munasinghe, the royalist, young student, gone the length and breadth of your area, traveled the world, worked in several places, worked with several global leaders. You come back to Sri Lanka now. Looking back at it all, if you had to live it all over again, any place that you'll change or wouldn't change a thing?
It's hard to say, Krishmal, because there is no counterfactual. But I think most of the decisions I've taken, branch points, have come out right. The one thing I would change, and I've tried to do it with my children, is I think I took a lot of risks. I mean, there are times in life when I have traveled alone in strange places where bad things could have happened. I was in South America around the time that Che Guevara was in Bolivia, and we thought it was very romantic going around but it was, it was very dangerous. I've jumped into the Amazon River, and my Brazilian friends screamed because I thought it was just water. And they said, no, there are piranhas there, and they pulled me out, and I didn't know.
But it's been worth it.
It's been worth it, and I mean, I've done skydiving. So the risks, when you're young, you think you're immortal. I would not recommend my children to take those kinds of risks.
Well, there you go. We've come to, before we go to that segment where we ask Professor Munasinghe to address you directly, it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege having the company of Professor Mohan Munasinghe. I know that the production team tried so hard to a very difficult, this busy man, and for him to grace us and to not just one program, over 2 programs, spend all this time with us, I don't think can be quantified in terms of money. Not just Rupawahini and our production team, I'm sure the entire Sri Lanka, particularly the future generations watching, will join me in thanking him for his time, his efforts. The only Sri Lankan Nobel Prize winner here in our studios at Rupawahini. Professor, before we go, what do you have to tell the future of Sri Lanka? Where are we now? Where do we need to go?
Well, my message is mainly for the youth of Sri Lanka, but also for the whole world. I think we are facing very difficult and intractable problems, but we should not give up hope. I think we have enough knowledge and enough skills to come out of it. The problem is that we are very close to the edge of a cliff. Either we fall off and then learn a bitter lesson, or we are smart enough to avoid going over the cliff. And I think we have that. Sustainomics, some of the other techniques we have learned to make development more sustainable, to get civil society and business to work with governments, to get young people to be more proactive, and not to leave everything to our leaders, to have faith in ourselves. I think all of those things must come to bear. And I think some of the new methods, the internet, the social media, all of these are new tools that people in our generation don't quite understand how to use. I mean, I try. But I think the young people have the tools and the knowledge to get the right world. What we have to do in our generation is to help them make that transition. If we stick by our guns and continue in our present ways, we will destroy the planet so much that whatever the young do, they will be in deep trouble. But we have to shift ourselves gradually, the present people who are in power, so that we give young people a chance when they come to power to make the change, to make the world more sustainable.
Professor Munasinghe, we say thank you to you. Checkmate viewers, thank you for being with us over 2 programs, not just one. Keep following us on our Facebook page at the bottom of the screen in front of you now, and on email. It's your interaction that makes a program better. Your interactions and your comments have made us deliver the goods that you want, so keep at it. Particularly those viewers who are watching us overseas, thank you for all your comments. I know that you sometimes stay up very late or very early to watch us, and those of you who watch us online, do keep on with Checkmate, and we'll try to give you a better program each time. And I'm sure all of you join me in saying thank you to this great son of Sri Lanka who's brought much pride to the nation, particularly for spending 2 hours of his time with us tonight, sharing his experiences for the betterment, not just 2 hours today, but over the past several years of his life, who has given to Sri Lanka so much. Professor Munasinghe, it's a great honor, sir, and a respect to have hosted you on our program. It's been personally a privilege to have had your company. I say thank you, and I won.
Thank you very much, Krismal. The pleasure and privilege is entirely mine. And I must say that I have been interviewed many times before. You're one of the warmest talk show hosts I've had. Thank you very much indeed. Ayubowan.
So, together with our production team who are all working hard with me on Checkmate, we bid you goodbye on another program with the hope of seeing you again on another similar Checkmate sometime in the very near future. And I leave you with these words from H.W. Longfellow, especially for our young generation of Sri Lankans watching. Heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, for they, whilst their companions slept, were toiling upwards in the night. Young Sri Lanka, future Sri Lanka, we'll see you again soon.